Good evening. It's good to be here. I am Rick Thomas. Our son, Hayden is here as well. Um, Several of you have already asked, how is my wife doing? She's doing just fine. She has been sick over the past few weeks. Well, that's not exactly right. She's been sick for a couple of weeks, and that's never happened before. So her name is Lucia, by the way. We were married in 1997. But anyway, Lucia's been taking care of her mother, who is at the end of life. And Lucia has a strong administrative gift. And so when things fall apart, people call on Lucia to administrate, to take care of business. And she's very good at it. I've said often that she could run a small third world country. She is highly gifted. And so she is the sister of four that is taking care of her mother. She's been doing that for several months now, which is providing 24/7 care, making sure that all the caregivers are in, and working with insurance, and working with hospice, and working with what do you call them? Nursing homes, and so forth, and trying to make her mother comfortable, which is no easy feat. And I don't say that disparagingly to my mother-in-law. We like each other, we get along, but it's no easy feat. I don't know if any of you have been in perpetual pain, but if you have been, you kind of understand that it's hard to be comfortable. Standing up's not good, sitting down's not good, laying down's not good, and so she's been trying to make her mother comfortable and deal with all the administrative aspects of it. On top of that, she runs our ministry. And so we just came back last week from Canada. We were up there for 10 days or so. And I think her body just said, "You're done." And so her body slapped her in the face and said, "You're done. You need to stop." And so she has been sleeping 3 days in a row, which is something that she's never done before. But she's on the other side of all of that and has a mild cough, but it was not wise for her to come up here. And I know some of you know her, and so you're feeling that disappointment as much as I do. But wisdom said she needs to stay home a bit longer. And so anyway, I wanted to go ahead and answer that question because I've been asked a few times, and I want you to know. She's doing well. Now, we have her replacement, our son Hayden, and so he's working back there, and anyway, you can speak with him. Now, we'll be doing a parenting conference Friday night and Saturday, so this may be a super blessing for some of you. You can ask Hayden about about all your parenting questions from a teenager's perspective. And so just ask him, and he will be glad to interact with you. So anyway, that is the update. All right, so again, we're from South Carolina. I've been doing biblical counseling since the late 90s. It is my career for multiple decades now. I love what I do, and I get to help people with problems. And you might say I am the poster boy for a person with problems, as God has been very kind to me by giving me a boatload of problems throughout my life that He is redeeming and using for His glory. As we move along, I may share some of those things with you as appropriate, as it fits within context of what we're talking about. Tonight, we're talking about marriage. Now, this is going to be a little bit more informal. I am informal, and so I prefer interaction. Not a big fan of monologuing, and so I do want you to ask, and you can ask any question that you want. Everything's on the table, so you can ask anything that you want. Of course, here we're speaking specifically about marriage. My desire is to serve you all over the next several days. And we have a standard policy within our ministry. The policy is quite straightforward. If we do not go home exhausted, it is your fault, not mine. And so I say that because we want you to use us. We want to serve you. We didn't come here to go on vacation. We came here to serve this local body. I mean that seriously. As I said, we were in Canada for 10 days. I spoke 15 times in those 10 days. We had many, many meetings throughout that time. On Sunday, as we were wrapping up, Lucia and I had planned a hiking trip up through Calgary and the Banff area, if you're familiar with it. And by the time Sunday rolled around, we were too exhausted to go hiking, and we just went home and went to bed. And so they did a good job. We crawled out of Calgary completely exhausted. In fact, as I have already outlined, Lucia's still recovering from our time, but some of that was obviously tied to the care that she's providing for her mother. And so, again, we want to serve you, and you can make that happen by engaging and asking questions. Now, I have books, free books, that I want you to have. I have 8 of them. These are downloadable digital books. And so at our last conference in Canada, we gave away 250 of these books. Y'all can do better than that. And so I am guilting you into getting more books than they took away in Canada. And it's really simple, and you all are QR ready. I've seen your internet QR code on the back wall, and your visitor card has the QR code, so I know you know how to use these things. You just put your phone camera over this QR code and it will download. There was a lady in Canada who took a picture of this, and she told me, I'm still waiting for my book to come in the mail. This is not how this works. And so put your camera over the QR code and you can download this book, these books, and there's 8 of them. All of these laminated cards are back there on the merch table, and so I don't want you to have some kind of weird humility. I just want you to go for it. And I want you to get these books. And so as far as marriage, what we're talking about for a few moments tonight, this one is called Help, My Marriage Has Grown Cold. This is a lady that got married and then realized, oops, I'm in a heap of trouble. And so this is a case study about walking through a marriage. This one here is on anger. It's called Mad. And I hope that all of you get mad because you need it, because every one of us struggle with anger. And so this book will help you as well. I have another one here called Wives Leading, an unusual book on biblical leadership. This is a book that teaches wives how to lead from behind, how to help their husbands to become the best leader that he can possibly be in the home. And the reason I say that is because the person who disciples me more effectively than anyone else is obviously my wife. Lucia knows more about me than any other person in the world. She has more data on me than any other person in the world. There's not an individual that comes closer to knowing more about me than my wife. And so, in my view, I would be a fool not to leverage my assets, not to encourage the person who knows the most about me to come alongside me and help me to be a better husband, to help me to be a better man. And we can do that from a submitted position. It's like an employee helping an employer being a better person. It's like a student helping a teacher to be a better person. You do not defile or defraud the hierarchy by coming alongside and encouraging that person you love to be the best person that they can be. We have been equipping our children all of their lives to come alongside their parents, to disciple us, to care for us, to speak into their lives, because Again, they know us better than anyone else. Last night, I spent an hour sitting on our daughter's bed. She's 17 and a half, walking through. This will be humorous to those of you who are familiar with Romans 7, verses 13 and following. Anza is her name. And Anza was saying, Dad, you know, I know what I ought to do, but sometimes I don't do it. And sometimes I think I should do this, but I end up doing that. And I said, well, there's a precedent for this. And so we spent an hour walking through Paul's angst that he had in his soul. I know what to do, but I do not do it. The thing that I love, I do not do. And that I desire to do, I do the other thing. Oh, wretched man that I am. And she said at the end, she said, Daddy, can we do more of this? But we're equipping her, because I want her, as well as Hayden and then our oldest daughter, to speak into our lives, but they can do that from a submitted position. And so that's what this book here is about. Not messing up the hierarchy. Two things are true at the same time. Lucia and I are absolutely equal before God. Nobody's better than anyone else. But there is also a hierarchy as well, and both of those things are true at the same time. And therefore, my appeal to my wife is to come alongside me to help me to be a better person. And so anyway, this book talks about that. I have another one that's called Communication, or communication, communication. And this is an excellent book on communication. So my point here is I want you to take advantage of these. They're yours free. It's our gift for you. All right, so we're going to talk about marriage for a few minutes. There have been a number of people who have come to me over the years in my biblical counseling life, and they say, you know, they have been married for 35 years, and now they are getting divorced. And that doesn't make any sense to me. Well, it makes sense to me why a person would do that. And I want to talk about that tonight ever so briefly. And first of all, let me explain where we are on this website here is our website, lifeovercoffee.com. Our resources are free for the most part, virtually all of them. And so these graphics that I'm showing you, they're yours if you want them. You can have them. So I want you to take advantage of them. As a matter of fact, if you go to the bottom of this website, you will see shareables. And if you click, and that's on any page, if you click on shareables, it will take you to where you can find these infographics. Now, the history of these infographics are this. When I counsel, and have counseled over the past number of years, I always draw pictures when I counsel, because that's how Jesus counseled. Jesus would use pictures to communicate. He would use the physical and the concrete to move us over to the abstract, to the spiritual. He would talk about the hairs on our head, and he would talk about the lilies in the field, and he would talk about camels and fig trees. And he used all of these physical, concrete illustrations to communicate these spiritual, abstract truths. And then you walk away, and we know these visual images. I mean, we have been taught by Jesus as well. And when I talk about the hair of your head, you know what he's saying. When I talk about a treasure, you know what he's saying in Matthew 6. And so using images is a helpful technique when you're mentoring, discipling, or counseling someone. And so historically, what I would do is I would draw pictures to the people that I'm counseling, and then they would take those pictures home with them, and then they could use them as they continue to rehearse the things that we have been talking about in a counseling session. Well, then I would come back and actually put these graphics in a picture like this here. What they would get would be stick figures on a piece of 8.5 and 11 sheet of printing paper. But this is actually a counseling session that I had with a couple many, many years ago. And again, you can have all of our graphics. And so what I would like for you to see is how a marriage ends up in divorce in these 4 steps here. In the center box, number 2, you see a couple. They are dating. And as you know, the euphemism for dating is the artificial season when 2 people fake each other out until they get married. That's what dating is. We put our best foot forward. We're not passing gas on our first date, I trust. And there's a lot of other things that we're not doing on our first date. There's a thing called self-control and discretion. And the truth is, when 2 people get married, strangers are marrying each other. The beauty of dating is like rebooting your computer every day. I would take Lucia home at the end of the day to her parents' house, and I would go to my place. And then the next day we would reboot, and it was a wonderful life. Lucia's actually sending me a text here. I don't think she's listening in. Is this being recorded? And so let me turn her off. And I mean that in the most loving way. Hayden, if you could tell her that she is live, and if she's going to say nice things, text away. But dating is a reboot, and you can start over, and it's a wonderful life. But then when you bring the sinner home, that's when you begin to learn things that you've never learned before. When Lucia was moving into my home, the week of our marriage, her best friend from high school and college, her name is Barbie, was helping her to move into my home. I was at work, and Barbie went into my walk-in closet, and she came out, and she said, "Lucia, are you sure you want to marry him?" Because what Barbie saw in my walk-in closet, first of all, every hanger in the closet was the same color. It was burgundy. And I was almost having an issue when I was in your walk-in closet downstairs. I found enough of white plastic hangers to get my few little clothes on. I was really scrambling. I was thinking I was going to have to use wire and white plastic, but there was enough white plastic hangers to get my clothes on. And so I had 75 burgundy hangers in my closet. They were all hung the same way. And then all the clothes were in genres. And so there was a coat, a jacket, and then there were pants, and there were long sleeve white shirts, short sleeve white shirt. Then there were long sleeve color shirts, short sleeve color shirts, and then there was and all gradated. And then there were t-shirts that were gradated as well until you finally ended with the white t-shirts. I mean, that's the way I'm sure all of your walk-in closets look like that. So I don't understand what the issue is. The biblical label for my condition is called anility. Anal. Anal. Yes. And so Barbie came out of the walk-in closet and said, "Lucia, are you sure you want to marry this human? He's got issues." And that is just the beginning of my problems. And so Lucia did not know that. And what are you going to do? I mean, it's a week before the wedding. Obviously, she is going to marry me, and she did. But the point is that we don't know all that we could know about the person that we are marrying. Now, there is wisdom in that because, again, a fool will reveal their entire mind. And so you don't walk up to that girl on the first date, "Hi, my name is Ricky, and here's my baggage here. Here's all the things that I struggle with, plus I snore profoundly loud. And I hang all of my clothes in gradations with the same color of hangers hanging the same way." You don't do that. That's how you run somebody off. And so what you do is you go Facebook on your date. You just present the better side of yourself to the world, especially to that girl or the guy that you want to date. And so the dating season is an artificial season where two people fake each other out until they get married. And so they date for however long that is, and then they move into the marital season. Now, if a couple does not get help the first 5 years of their marriage, they really could be in a tough situation. And the reason I say that, a couple of reasons. First of all, is two sinners that are marrying each other. Marriage is two sinners in a box. That's what marriage is. It's two sinners coming together to live in a box for the rest of their life. That's marriage. But at the 5-year mark, typically, these two sinners in a box start having children. A synonym for children is distraction. And so what happens in these marriages is that the wife, generally speaking, can be very busy with the children, and the husband can be working, generally speaking. That's not how it is all the time, but how it is all the time is that they have very busy lives, however that manifests itself. And they become very preoccupied. So this honeymoon season window, it shrinks. And generously, you could say that it's a 5-year window. And then they're really dialed into the busyness and the frenetic pace of their lives. If you don't get help at that point for the stuff that is in your relationship, it's going to be tough. And it will become tougher and tougher and tougher. See, here's the thing that we don't calculate into our relationships. I started at point number 2 on this graphic. But that's not where this begins. You see, point number 1, Biff and Mabel have their individual lives. And so what we don't recognize is that when we become married or dating, we set our baggage aside. All of those things that we know about ourselves, we set it aside, and we enter into the blissfulness of a dating relationship where everything is just wonderful. And then we tie the knot and get married. Guess what? All of that baggage has been there the whole time. In the counseling world, we call that shaping influences. Things that have shaped us to be the people that we are. And the primary shaping influence that we have is that we are Adamic beings. We are fallen. We are totally depraved. We bring total depravity into a relationship. So here are two totally depraved people pouring themselves into one container, two sinners in a box. That is a formula for combustion. For example, my daddy was an authoritarian, abusive drunk. That's who he was. He was a very mean man, and he beat his boys all the time. I mean, just beat us all the time. And being cursed out daily was just an expectation. It was not an anomaly. This is how I was reared. And then some of you know our story is that as my two older brothers, by the time they were 18, they were in prison. And then years later, both of them were murdered. And then I was in jail when I was 15. And this is part of my story. I brought that into our marriage and the shaping influences of that into our marriage. And there's a whole lot more. Some of the things that Lucia brought into her marriage is that Lucia was born in a Christian bubble. She was reared in a Christian bubble. She went to Christian schools. She went to church. I was going to say Christian church, but that's redundant. She went to church. She has lived a Christian life. And so now here comes me with my excessive baggage into this relationship. Needless to say, we had a lot of things to work through in the early years of our marriage. And for couples that don't get the help to work through those things, what happens is they go into number 3 here, the marriage season, and they're distracted. And then those children get older and they start to empty nest. And so now this couple, they're dating, and then they go like this for 20 years, doing whatever they do. And then the distractions go away, the children. The husband may retire, and then they come around here, and it's like, oh, you. I remember you. And then all the stuff that was never taken care of from 20 and 30 years ago is now right in front of them. And so you have options at that point. It's like, come on, grandbabies. I need grandbabies. Golf, a side hustle of some sort. Some Christians will just limp on into heaven that way. And then some get a divorce. And they say, well, they've been married 35 years and they got a divorce. I don't understand why. It makes perfect sense to me. I've seen it happen scores of times in counseling where there was so much stuff that went on between them that they never worked through that stuff. And now at this point in their life, they choose to go their separate ways. And many of them they come in like this, dating, they get married, they don't work on their conflict, they go out, get a divorce, and then they find somebody else and they start the process all over again. And so my appeal, my encouragement is that you do what you have to do, and I'm going to give you some advice on that. Do what you have to do so that you don't find yourself in that position. And so this graphic here really communicates what I'm talking about, is that these couples do not have a sin plan. They don't have a plan to deal with sin. And so when sin happens, there's no plan. It's like you spill something on your carpet, you have a plan. You go get a spray bottle and a cloth. You get a vacuum cleaner. If it's really bad, you go call somebody to come in with a heavy-duty vacuum cleaner, but you have a plan for cleaning up the mess on the carpet. But sometimes we can create a mess in our relationships and we have no sin plan. There's no plan to take care of it. And so what happens in the dating relationship, as you see here on the screen, two people meet. They're crazy about each other. They can't talk enough. There's not enough time in the day for these two people to talk to each other. Today, they're texting strings. I mean, it would be longer than any scroll from 2,000 years ago if you would roll it out as a text in code. I'm officially an old man now, and I can't read kid code, teenage code when they talk to each other. I'm asking Hayden, what does IDK means? He says, I don't know. Well, if you don't know, it's like, who does know? For those of you who didn't catch that, IDK means I don't know. That was funny. I've never said that before in my life. I just made that up spontaneously, and I was tickled by it, and so I said, I'm just going to roll with it. This is the part where Lucia's in the back of the room, and she's going like this here. You're going to miss her by the time this week is over, I promise you. Some of you already are. Aaron knows. We call her St. Lucia. She lives on an island. Which, by the way, I live on military time. Lucia lives on island time. Those are just some of the differences between two people. And if a person that lives on military time, again, is the anal disorder, and then the person that lives on island time, that is something that you really have to work through, because that's two different ways of approaching time management. The guy that lives on military time will die of a stroke. Okay, there are two women that are just laughing Do your husbands live on military time? We're being informal. But people that live on island time, they don't die. They just kind of disappear. It's like, I don't know, she just wandered off. Military time guys laying in the middle of the living room with a heart attack. But these are some of the things that you have to work out. Let me share a story with you. I've been married before, and so I got married in 1979. God saved me in 1984, and in 1987, my wife started doing stuff. In 1988, she left. By the time 1988 rolled around, I was in Bible college. And it was the most devastating time in my entire life. Of the things that I've mentioned before don't even compare with what happened starting April the 8th, 1988. As a matter of fact, I told the Lord, I said, I want to make copious notes about what I'm going through, because I don't want to go through it again. Two, I want to learn what you're trying to teach me, because I know you're trying to teach me something. And so 30 years later, I sat down and I wrote a book called Suffering Well. It's an autobiographical journey through those years. 4 years specifically. I quit God 487 times to my count. You can't really quit God, so that becomes a problem. The whole eternal security thing, but nevertheless, I quit God. And about time 487, the Lord seemed to prompt my heart I want you to spend some time in the book of Job. There was a man in the land of Uz, his name was Job. He feared God and eschewed evil. And here's a man that was trying to do the right thing, and all hell broke loose on him, and he was devastated. But I knew when you get to the end of the book of Job in 42:10, it says God turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends, and so I knew that there was a good, somewhat good, bittersweet outcome at the end of the story. And so I wanted to learn what Job went through, and so I spent 4 years studying the book of Job. 30 years later, I put it in a book, What God Taught Me. So this is a hybrid of an autobiographical book through the 42 chapters of Job. It's titled Suffering Well. The subtitle is How to Steward God's Most Feared Blessing. Job said in chapter 3, verse 24, 25, he said, "The thing that I have feared has come upon me." Job was a legalist. He feared that his children would do wrong, so he sacrificed for his children. And of course, everything fell apart in Job's life. All of us live with this awareness that God is not safe. And we see that all over the Bible. God is not safe. He's good, but he is not safe. And the thing that he feared has come upon him. The worst thing that could happen has happened to him. And now I am experiencing the worst thing that I know that could possibly happen to me. And so I wanted to learn the lessons of Job. And so I wrote in this book. By the way, the subtitle, How to Steward God's Most Feared Blessing, actually came out of a counseling session where a husband had committed adultery 3 times. And the wife was working through the adulterous affair. And at some point in the counseling, she says, "I just need to know how to steward the very thing that I fear." And when she said it, I said, "I'm taking it." And so when I came time to write my book, I used the line that she said, the thing that I fear, how to steward God's most feared blessing. God restored their marriage, and they're doing very well today, but it was not easy. Okay. Many years later, I meet Lucia. Specifically, it was July the 24th, 1994 at 10:35 in the morning is when I met her. That sounds like he's really on it. The truth is, Sunday school started at 10:30 and she was 5 minutes late. Lucia can't tell time. She lives on island time. That's why I remember it. So Captain Anility, who lives on military time, is liking this girl that can't tell time. Well, we eventually get married. And in the early part of our marriage, Lucia would say, I'm going to Walmart or wherever. I'll be back at 7:30. She's back at 8:30. Obviously, she's committing adultery. Obviously. And I would accuse her of committing adultery, sleeping around. I brought that baggage into our relationship. Now think about this. Here's a person that has been deeply affected by one of the worst things that ever could happen to you. And then you marry to someone who can't tell time, which seems almost innocuous. We don't know where our problems are going to come from. They can come from the most unsuspecting places. And so now we have a communication problem. And it's like, I went to Walmart. That's the bowels of Hades. What would you expect? You can't go to Walmart and come back at any predictable time. I know that cognitively. But when you have been affected by something in such a devastating way, you can carry the baggage of the things that have happened to you for a very long time. Now, I don't see the baggage as a negative thing. I see the baggage as an opportunity for God's strength to be perfected in our weakness, as God told Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse number 9. God allows traumatic and horrible things to come in our lives. And then those things actually become, they put us in a place of weakness so that God's strength can be perfected in us, which is what Paul was saying in 2 Corinthians 4:7. Why should you be a fragile jar of clay? We are jars of clay. Why? He finishes the sentence to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. And so God brings us to a place of fragility and vulnerability. He does that intentionally so that the power of God can come from those jars of clay. He gives us a thorn in the flesh, this irretrievable, unmovable thorn in our flesh, so that God's strength can be perfected in our weakness. And as Paul gave us the most beautiful life statement that has ever been uttered in my view, is in verse number 10 of 2 Corinthians 12. For when I am weak, then I am strong. And so I don't want anybody to go through anything horrifically, but we have to get to that place in our life where we see the horrificness of what we're going through becomes actually the power of God operating in our lives. And Joseph said it in the clearest way in 50:20. You meant it for evil. God meant it for good. But however, to get to that place to where you can see God's strength acting out in you, you have to work through some stuff. And Lucia and I had to work through, that's just one illustration of stuff that we've had to work through. And all of you who are married, you have your own junk too. You're two sinners in a box. And we have to work through it, because here's what happens. And so in this graphic, what you see here are two people dating, and they're coming together like this in this dating relationship. Then at some point they get married. Now they're one flesh, but not practically. It was like when I was talking to Ansel last night, I was saying that positionally, you have everything that you need in Christ. Practically, you're growing into this reality. And so when a couple comes together, positionally, they're 100% one flesh. Practically, functionally, we got work to do. And so a couple comes together at marriage, and they continue coming together all the days of their lives until they're 90 years old and they meet Jesus. And they are as assimilated as they could possibly be. But that is a process that continues functionally and practically all the days of their lives, even though they are 100% one flesh today that they're married. What happens, though, is that when the two sinners get in the box, and then all that baggage in point number 1 on that other graphic is poured into that box too. And now stuff starts happening that we did not anticipate, and because two strangers actually marry, they didn't see this coming. I just went to Walmart. You got to be kidding me. And so what happens is that the two people functionally, they start doing this. Now they start paralleling with each other, like two silos, which is what you see in the graphic. I call it pockets of silence, where we withhold information from each other. This is one of the most dangerous things that, and by the way, in this book, again, it's free, and y'all have to get more than 250 of these free books to beat Canada, because we're better than Canada. I talk about that in this book in communication. And one of the most dangerous things that can happen in any relationship, husband and wife, parent and child, friend to friend, is pockets of silence that comes between us. It's like a cancer. And it will metastasize in that relationship. I had a pastor tell me one time, Dwayne said, no, I'm just kidding. Oops. No, a pastor from another place, another state, another person. But true story, this pastor told me, he said, I like going out on double dates because I can sit there at the table and listen to my wife talk to her girlfriend and know what's going on in my wife's life. That's called a pocket of silence. And pocket is really understating the situation. And I thought, oh, my word. Your motivation for going on double dates is so that you can get the scoop on what your wife has been thinking about, the person that you live with 24/7. I don't think that's an anomaly. I think a lot of couples live this way. And it starts early with a disappointment or a frustration or an unmet expectation or an over-exaggerated desire that was not met. And then one or the other or both will just, they don't talk about it. And now that little pocket just forms in the relationship. And then, of course, now we're heading toward carpal tunnel syndrome, a repeated act over and over again until finally our wrists swell so much that we are in pain. Well, in marriage, we can have a similar thing, analogously speaking, that these little subtle disappointments come between us, and then we silo like this, and then if we're not careful, it can get wider and wider and wider. Any questions? What question do you have? Just raise your hand, and any thoughts about this? Yes. The question is, what does a sin plan look like? There's a couple of answers to that question. One's a bit more longer to flesh out, but let me look at this graphic here to help answer that question. Now, this would be the challenge for any two people married, whatever the construct is. All right, so on the left side of the screen, we have husband, let's say, Biff, and he's a Christian, and he has a relationship with God, Father, Son, Spirit. He has a relationship with the Trinity. And as you see on these arrows, Biff has a positive relationship and a negative relationship, just for sake of illustration. We all have a positive and negative relationship with God. And what I mean by that is this. There are areas in our lives where we are appropriating the grace of God, we are maturing, we're changing, things are good, and we're growing up as newborn babes, and we're starting to eat a little bit of meat, and that's just our relationship with God, and it is great. But the Bible teaches that we're not perfect, and we won't be perfect until heaven. Therefore, the implication is obvious. There's a dark side to all of us. For sake of illustration, I call that our negative experience with God, where we are not appropriating God's grace, where we are not changing. And so we have this relationship, as you read in Hebrews chapter 4, verses 12 and 13. Verse 12 talks about God's word, but in verse 13 it says, all things are naked and open to the eyes of him with whom we must give an account. We are naked and exposed before God. He knows everything that's going swell, and he knows everything that's not going so well. He knows everything about us, the good and the bad. That is our relationship with God. As the bumper sticker might say, he is still working on me. But here's the thing, is that on the other side of the screen, we have Mabel, and she has a relationship with God, and she is just growing and maturing and changing, and we call it progressive sanctification. But we know Mabel's not perfect, and so there are aspects to Mabel's life that needs improvement. Now, we're okay, I think, for the most part, with God knowing our full selves. But where we are not okay is for other people to know our full selves. I say it this way, is that everybody has a representative of themselves. That person that represents us. It's a carefully edited version of ourselves that we craft, and we put it out into the public space, and we hope people would find that person more acceptable than who we know ourselves to be. This person represents me, this image, this projection. This is a part of our Adamic problem, because this is what Adam did. When Adam sinned, he recognized there's something wrong with me, and he began to experience something that he had never experienced before: fear and guilt and shame. Shame is an internal awkwardness that we have in our own souls, not comfortable in our own skin. And so what did Adam do? He began to hide behind fig leaves. And this is our temptation, to hide behind fig leaves. And so we come into this church building on Sunday morning, and it can be a room full of representatives. Hi, my name is Brother Rick. I have been reading my Bible all week. God is so good. This nugget from James, it just fed my soul all week. And you want to say, gag me with a spoon? Like, seriously? I don't want to talk to your representative. I want to talk with you. That's really what we ought to do. That will make for an awkward moment. The word FINE is an acronym, FINE. It means feelings inside, never expressed. So you meet Brother Spiritual on Sunday morning, how are you? Fine. Oh, feelings inside never expressed? Tell me more. That will get beyond this carefully crafted image that we place out into the public domain, hoping they will find that person more acceptable than this person I know myself to be. Now, God knows the plus and the negative. God sees in the dark, all things are naked. Now, there's two ditches that we could fall into, and I'm not saying that. Ditch number one, we say nothing. Ditch number two, we say everything. A fool will reveal his entire mind. And so, somewhere between those two ditches of not being transparent and tweeting out everything you ever thought is wisdom, where we have at least one friend in our lives, and in marriage, that should be our spouses. The person who has the most data, the most intel, the most information on us is our spouses. And so obviously, the one who knows more negative about you should be the person that we invite behind the representative, behind the fig leaves of our lives, and begin an incremental process of communicating our real selves to that person. Now, there's conditions for this, and so part of the answer to the question is communication. But it is a specific kind of communication, and this word communication is called fellowship in the Bible. It means koinonia, as you know. An English word for the Greek word koinonia is fellowship. An English word for koinonia is participation, where you are participating. You'll see that in Philippians 2, the participation of the Spirit, the koinonia of the Spirit. And so a husband and wife enter into this biblical fellowship, this biblical koinonia, where they are incrementally and gradually revealing more and more of themselves to each other so they can spur one another on to loving good deeds. But here's the primary condition for that to happen. I mean, obviously on one side it has to be courage and transparency and vulnerability, but on the other side, see, the reason we're okay with God knowing all this data, besides the fact that we have no choice, but the reason that we're okay with it is because of what we read in Romans 8:1. There is no condemnation. God doesn't condemn us. We can come before the throne boldly. We can confess our sins and be forgiven of our sins. We don't have to experience shame before God because we know that there is no condemnation. He knows all this dirt. And so therefore, when a husband and wife come together, if they want to enjoy true koinonia, then they have to communicate more than the positive things. They have to begin to reveal parts of themselves that's been in the shadows, that's been in the darkness. And there is a condition on the receiver of that information. And I've seen this happen before. It can tend to happen more with us men, but women will do this too, obviously. But let's say that a wife comes to her husband and she has her heart in her hand and I want to be transparent. Here's a struggle, here's an issue, here's a vulnerability, here's a weakness, here's a transparent moment. And then the husband meets it like that, says some unkind comment or whatever, then it will be a lot harder for her to do that a second time. And then that pocket of silence will, boom, it will pop up in her soul. And what you'll find in many cases is that you'll go on double dates and the women will be chatting each other up. What you'll find in the ladies' Bible study, where the ladies' Bible study becomes a surrogate husband, to where the women would go to the Bible study and experience that koinonia with another woman, to have some fellowship, just somebody that I can be vulnerable and transparent. And they will be looking for other places to be able to communicate, have that kind of koinonia, because I can't have it in this relationship. And so the first, like if any marriage were like that, then the first thing that has to happen is that there just has to be a truce, and we've got to be lovingly but courageously clear with the state of the union. Like, this is where we are. And if we can't have that civil conversation, then we need to invite Dwayne, Josh, Orville, whomever, into this to help, to mediate, so that we can get to this place. Or what's going to happen is there won't be true koinonia in the relationship. People will find their fellowship through other means, and then they'll come back around in 35 years. And in many of those cases, they do get divorced. And so the process is we have to make a commitment that we're going to understand what koinonia is, and we're going to learn how to communicate. And again, this little booklet, there's no trick here, by the way. These are absolutely free. There's nothing here. I really want you to have these. We're underwritten as a nonprofit, so people donate to our ministry. That's what I'm saying. So we're not trying to make money. It's more about we want to serve you. God will take care of us financially, but we want to serve you. And this book, I do highly recommend that you get it. And you will find that part of that sin plan, obviously, this type of koinonia, but forgiveness is going to be a huge part of it. And there's another book here that I did not mention. It's called Don't Apologize, Don't Say I'm Sorry. This is a book on biblical forgiveness. Unfortunately, the way many people clean up their messes is by apologizing. Besides the irony of it, apologeo is actually giving a defense, but nevertheless. The transactional forgiveness and walking through a forgiveness, will you forgive me, and transacting that forgiveness. And there's more there. But there has to be a commitment from both parties that we're going to step into this lifestyle of koinonia, and we're going to communicate at a level that we haven't previously to this point, or not since our dating relationship. Another question. I think the time was 8:15, and so it's 8:07, so we're good. And I will honor all the time this weekend. I will stop in mid-sentence if the time's up. I promise you, I won't take you a minute past. Aaron. And that's one impediment. What's the other impediment? You said something about forgiveness. Yeah, so the question is, if one is willing, one's not, which, by the way, is almost always the scenario. Because it's two different people. We're at two different places with God. We have two different relationships with God. It's two different maturation processes. I mean, if Lucia gets a clue, it doesn't automatically mean I'm going to get a clue. And that's the case almost all the time. It would be kind of remarkable for both of them, ding, we both got a clue at the same time and we're ready to go. It just doesn't work that way hardly ever. You're lucky if it does, or sovereign luck. We don't believe in luck. I like to modify my luck with sovereignty. One of those would be for the wife would be this. So what you and whether it's the wife or the husband, this applies actually to both, but you have to recognize where the other person is. And so you have to define your starting point. Where's your starting point? And so I am willing to be open and honest. Your spouse is not willing to step into this level of mature communication at this point. You have to know your starting point. And so if that's the starting point, then okay, this is where we are. And so the starting point's not going to be koinonia, where two people are doing this. It's going to be different. And so now, how can I cooperate with God in restoring this person? So Paul talked about that in Galatians 6:1. If any person is caught in a transgression, the word caught there is like our modern word for addiction. And so let's say that this spouse is ready to go, but this spouse is not at the starting line yet. They are caught in whatever reason that they just not in a place they want to step into that kind of Christian maturity. All right, so Paul said that if anyone is caught, you who are spiritual, meaning you who have the Spirit, meaning Christians is what he's saying. Only Christians are spiritual. And so you Christians, and so Christian spouse, you restore them in a spirit of gentleness. The word restore, not that you need to know this, but it's kartatizo is the Greek word. Restore. That word appears 3 times in the New Testament. In Mark 1:19, it talks about James and John were walking by the river and they saw these nets. They were mending their nets. That word kartatizo, restore in Galatians 6:1. You who are spiritual, restore them. Kartatizo. In Mark 1:19, it's mending. It's a good word picture. This person has a broken net. And so you want to mend their net. There's something wrong with them. The other place where that shows up is Hebrews 11:3. In Hebrews 11:3, it says, it's talking about creation, that God created when he spoke his word. Kartatizo is what the Hebrew writer was saying. And so you speak God's word and it restores. And so you find your starting point. This is where the person is. And then you ask God to give you the insight and the wisdom to come alongside them in a spirit of gentleness to restore whatever that is. I'll illustrate that in just a moment. But he also says, keep watch on yourself lest you start sinning your brains out. That's my paraphrase. Because what happens is the spouse who's ready to go can actually cop a self-righteous attitude. A self-righteous attitude, it's like, hey, knucklehead, why can't you be like me? I'm ready to communicate. I'm ready to be honest. I'm ready to be transparent. Koinonia, you were there that night when the guy from South Carolina was talking. Let's go. What's wrong with you? That's a self-righteous attitude. And a spouse can feel that. And by the way, there's no grace for that attitude because Christ did not come for the righteous. He came for the unrighteous. And so the person that looks down on another individual is in a whole heap of trouble, because God is now warring against this person who is looking down on this knucklehead who can't get his act together. And this is what Paul was getting at in Galatians 6:1. Restore them in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on your souls, lest you too be tempted. And so they have to guard their heart. All right, so let me illustrate restore, and we'll finish with this. And I'm almost in mid-sentence, and I'm going to stop. I don't have a context. I did not have a context for most of my life for being honest and vulnerable and transparent with anyone. Because if I was transparent, my dad was going to hit me with a stick, beat me with a belt, curse me out, throw something at me. And so I learned to keep my mouth shut. I learned not to put myself in a position to where I possibly could be criticized or condemned. All right, so imagine you marry that kind of person who maybe even wants to be vulnerable or transparent, but doesn't have a context for that, doesn't have a category for that, or the only category they have is condemnation. And so again, we have to identify where this person is. Why are they this way? What has happened to them? We're not looking down on them. We're trying to understand them so that we can come alongside them to serve them, to help them. And then Paul said in Romans 2:4, it's the kindness of God that leads to repentance. And so that's part of the answer. It's 8:15. I'm going to pray and then we will close. If we can serve you in any way, please let us know throughout this week. The parenting thing will be important. I think we're doing something with small groups and a couple of other meetings. These cards here are back there on the table. And oh, by the way, these books, as per usual, these books are $500 a piece, but we have a special conference price of $10. And so I reckon I would appeal to y'all, wait till after the church meeting on Sunday and get the full price of $500 a piece. But if you don't want to wait, you can go ahead and get these books for $10 a piece. And maybe that would be better for you, not for me. But you're welcome to get the conference rate of $10 a piece. And I'll explain more about those books later on. Dwayne, thank you. I'll pray and then you can do what you do. Father, thank you.